You want to start a restaurant, you've got $150,000 of your own cash, a $250,000 SBA-backed loan waiting if the bank likes your plan, and 365 days to turn a chicken sandwich shop in Columbus, Ohio into $1 million restaurant. The catch is you've never run a fast food brand from scratch, and if you pick the wrong location or waste the money on the wrong build-out, that starting stack disappears before the first customer ever walks in. So you do the only smart thing first. You stop dreaming about burgers and logos, and you start testing food. You form the LLC, open the bank account, file the Ohio paperwork, and spend the first few weeks pretending the future of the business depends on every sauce ratio, because it does. You build a 10-item menu, then immediately realize that 10 items in restaurant language usually means 40 ingredients, a supply chain headache, and a kitchen that moves like it's tired. After 6 paid pop-ups through licensed commercial kitchens, you've got around 600 real transactions worth of feedback. The verdict is brutally useful. People like the chicken, but the menu is bloated, so you cut it down hard. Chicken sandwiches, tenders, bowls, loaded fries, 4 sauces. That's it. The kind of menu that can actually survive lunch rush. That early testing costs you about $12,000, but it saves you from signing a lease based on vibes. And that matters, because the easiest way to lose a restaurant game is to mistake a cheap shell for a cheap restaurant. You almost do it anyway. One raw space looks bigger, shinier, and less expensive per square foot, but it would require months of build-out, and months are poison when your target is $1 million in a year. Instead, you hunt for second-generation restaurant space in Columbus, where the market is big enough to support volume and the rent isn't coastal crazy. Columbus has the population, the food spend, the workers, the students, the offices, and the delivery radius you need. You find in one 800-square-foot place with an existing hood, grease interceptor, plumbing, and just enough of the bones already in place to make the math work. That's the real move. Not starting cheap, starting fast. By day 25, you've signed the lease and negotiated a tenant improvement allowance that takes $40,000 off the build-out. You're still on the hook for everything else, but that allowance buys you breathing room. The SBA loan closes, and suddenly you've got a total war chest of about $400,000. It feels like a lot until you start spending it. Permits come first, because Columbus doesn't care about your logo before it cares about your grease trap. You submit plans, pay for expedited review, handle the LLC filing, vendor's license, food manager certification, building permits, fire inspection, signage, and insurance. Legal and professional costs alone chew up around $12,000, and the clock is already moving. You spend more on drawings than some people spend on a used car, which is a great way to learn that restaurants are basically vehicles that run on compliance. Then the real spending begins. Used and refurbished equipment goes in because new equipment would eat too much cash. 2 fryers, a flat top, refrigeration, prep stations, hot holding, dishwashing, POS, smallwares. You keep the hood and grease infrastructure because without them, the project becomes a construction hobby. The kitchen build-out, lease deposits, counters, menu boards, furniture, inventory, branding, website, marketing, and payroll reserve all stack up fast. By the time the doors are ready to open, you've spent about $290,000 before revenue ever starts. You still have about $110,000 left at opening, and you protect $70,000 of that like your life depends on it, because in a restaurant, the first emergency usually arrives right after the first good week. Day 42 proves that. The electrical and fire suppression work turns out to be more expensive than expected. Existing infrastructure is usable, but not enough for the load you planned. You're staring at an $8,000 surprise and a schedule that just lost 8 days of comfort. You can either cut cosmetic upgrades or borrow expensive short-term money to keep the dining room pretty. You choose function over style. The walls can look better later. Dead restaurants never get to redecorate. By day 75, the place is open, staffed, inspected, and barely on schedule. You've hired 12 employees, which sounds glamorous until you realize that most of them need training. All of them need schedules, and every single one of them eventually needs payroll. You're paying crew around $15 to $18 an hour. Shift leads more than that, plus payroll taxes. Minimum wage is not your real labor cost. Reliability, the soft open starts with controlled hours, a limited delivery radius, and you on the line during the rush. Your first customer walks in for pickup, and for a second, the whole thing feels real. Then the ticket printer starts doing what ticket printers do, which is turning confidence into paper. Revenue finally begins on day 76, and the first weeks are equal parts encouraging and humbling. You bring in about $60,000 across the phase, but the operation still loses around $12,000 because your labor is too heavy, your delivery mix is too expensive, and your service is too slow on weekends. Some tickets are taking 20 to 25 minutes. That's not a restaurant. That's a waiting room with fries. The first bad reviews hit hard because they're not about food quality. They're about time. You could ignore them and hope people get nicer, but the market doesn't reward hope. It rewards speed. So you split frying from assembly, create numbered batch production, and cap delivery orders instead of chasing every sale. That's the first major strategy change. You stop treating every order channel like it's equally profitable. By day 105, the business has crossed 3,600 transactions and $60,000 in revenue. But the lesson is clear. Gross sales don't mean much if the line can't move. You simplify again. One slow-selling bowl disappears. Direct online ordering gets pushed harder. SMS loyalty launches. You train 2 shift leads and start steering customers away from third-party delivery, because those apps can bring discovery while quietly collecting their fee at the door. DoorDash might help people find you, but you don't want your whole margin living there. That shift starts to work. By day 150, revenue has climbed to $170,000 cumulative, and you're no longer just surviving opening chaos. You're getting repeat orders. You've added office tasting drops, standardized portions with scales and scoops, and raised delivery menu prices by 12% because your math has finally become more important than your fear of upsetting strangers online. At this point, the business is still losing money overall, but the losses are shrinking, and the biggest danger is actually overstaffing the slow hours. Then you hit the lowest cash point. Around day 150, you're sitting on about $81,000 cash, still making debt payments, still carrying the weight of a restaurant that hasn't fully settled yet. That's the kind of number that makes you look at every future purchase twice. The first profitable phase arrives between days 151 and 210. You hire a catering coordinator who also works the floor, and suddenly the business has a second engine. Offices, dealerships, and medical facilities start buying fixed packages for 10, 25, and 50 people. You add a second assembly station. You bump combo prices by $0.75. Revenue reaches about $180,000 in the phase, and you finally scrape into profit by roughly $4,000. Not a windfall, just proof that the machine can make money. Then the machine gets tested. On day 173, your refurbished refrigeration fails during a busy week. Food temperature becomes unsafe, inventory dies, and the service day gets cut short. The damage costs you about $6,000 between product loss, repairs, and missed sales. You have one clean choice: rent emergency refrigeration, throw out the bad food, and keep the health department out of your life. The wrong choice is to try to save inventory by gambling with customer safety. You don't do that. You take the loss, fix the cooler, and build temp alerts into the operation afterward. By day 210, the restaurant has pulled in around $350,000 cumulative revenue. You've got 16 employees, roughly 300 daily order capacity, and a business that can finally see the next layer of growth. Chicken and oil prices rise, though, and that costs you more than you want to admit. A few employees ask for higher wages, margins get squeezed from both sides. You rebid suppliers, improve yield, tighten waste, and selectively raise menu prices instead of quietly downgrading quality. That decision keeps the brand honest and the numbers alive. This is where the business becomes real scale, not just recovery. Between days 211 and 275, you add a second fryer, promote a lead into kitchen management, and begin pushing catering harder into schools, sports teams, and weekend events. You launch bottled sauces, improve packaging for bigger orders, and start paying yourself a modest founder salary. Revenue jumps to $240,000 in this phase. Profit turns positive by about $16,000. You're still working the line too much, but now the line exists as a system instead of a chaos machine. Around day 260, you hit your first $100,000 rolling 30-day revenue period. That's the point where the business stops looking like a launch and starts looking like a local brand. Then you make the most expensive hiring mistake of the year. You bring in an outside assistant manager because the resume looks good, the scheduling is a mess, overtime climbs, employees get irritated, and turnover starts bleeding you. The problem isn't that the person is evil. It's that restaurant leadership is not a paper exercise. By day 287, you've lost about $12,000 to bad schedules, retraining, and disruption. You cut the manager loose and promote a proven shift lead instead. That move is inconvenient, but it's cheaper than keeping a mistake on payroll because you already paid for the mistake. At this stage, the business needs systems more than hustle. You add dedicated prep hours, build a second rush hour assembly line, negotiate volume pricing with suppliers, and remove 2 low-margin delivery items that look nice on paper and do nothing for the bank account. Recurring office catering starts to stabilize the calendar. By day 335, cumulative revenue reaches about $850,000, and the restaurant is handling around 267 daily transactions with 22 employees on the team. And then you reach the final month with the target still in range but not safe. You need about $150,000 more in revenue, and the last 30 days are where restaurants either sprint correctly or collapse into discount panic. You do not discount your way out of this. You protect margin. You schedule catering separately from counter peaks. You secure holiday office and sports orders. You require deposits and advance notice. Because large orders without boundaries can wreck lunch service faster than low sales ever could. You keep a backup fryer and refrigeration service agreement in place. You use direct order promotions instead of desperate price cuts. And you stay in the kitchen watching flow. Because at this point, your job is not being the owner in theory. It's being the extra pair of eyes that keeps the whole thing from tilting. On day 362, a prepaid office catering order worth about $4,300 lands, and that one order pushes cumulative revenue over $1 million. Not by magic. By repeat customers, controlled capacity, and a menu simple enough to survive real volume. By day 365, the restaurant finishes at $1,020,000 in cumulative gross revenue. You've hit the title's target. Monthly revenue is running around $165,000 to $175,000, and the business is producing about $20,000 to $24,000 a month in pre-tax operating profit. You've got roughly $148,000 cash left, about $238,000 in debt remaining, 24 employees on the books, and one location that can serve about 500 orders a day when fully pushed. But the year doesn't end with a giant stack of free cash. It ends with a profitable restaurant that still carries launch costs, depreciation, and debt. Pre-tax accounting result for the year is still about negative $28,000 after everything is counted. That's the part nobody puts on the Instagram caption. Revenue crossed $1 million, the monthly machine is healthy, and the business survives because you opened fast, kept the menu narrow, protected cash, raised prices before margin died, and turned catering into a second line of production instead of a second location. That's what gets you to the number on the final day. Not one viral moment, just a restaurant that finally learned how to be a restaurant.